We make life so much harder to live with, all our planning and figuring about things that are not and will never be. Let me say that again. We make life so much harder to live with all our planning and figuring about things that are not and will never be. You can exhaust yourself rehearsing all the scenarios of a situation, and mental fatigue is the worst. Okay? In a single verse, Genesis 49:22, the Bible lays out the model of how to live. Now, that may seem a little weird because it's in context. Let me tell you what we're talking about here. In Genesis 49, Jacob is blessing his children and kind of last things he's saying to them. And he comes to Joseph, and he says this. He says, Joseph is a fruitful bough. Excuse me. Is a fruitful bough, even a fruitful bough by a well, whose branches run over the wall. And you say, that's kind of a weird verse. And so let me tell you a little bit more about it. First of all, his entire statement about Joseph says, Joseph is a fruitful bough, even a fruitful bough by a well, whose branches run over the wall. The archers have sorely grieved him and shot at him and hated him, but his bow abode in strength, and the arms of his hands were made strong by the hands of the mighty God of Jacob. From thence is the shepherd, the stone of Israel. Even by the God of thy father who shall help thee, and by Almighty who shall bless thee with blessings of heaven above, blessings of the deep that lieth under, blessings of the breast and of the womb. And he goes on and reads goes on and says, the blessings of thy father have prevailed above the blessings of my progenitors unto the utmost bond of the everlasting hills. They shall be on the head of Joseph, and on the crown of the head of him that was separate from his brethren. So this is his blessing. Yes. They don't have enough volume in the back there. So Patrick, could you just bring the slider up just a little bit on that one? That would be awesome. Okay. Sorry, voice is really giving me trouble this morning. So what is this all about? So he's talking about the blessings and whatnot on Joseph, and I'm reading from the King James today, partly because I don't like the translations that are done by the other versions of the Bible we've been using on this particular verse. They just say something completely different. Okay? So, Joseph is a fruitful bough. And if you read the other versions, it says Joseph is like a wild donkey. I mean, it doesn't make any sense, right? So, we're going to go with this. Joseph is a fruitful bough. A bough being like a branch, right? And it says it's fruitful. And the idea of boughs and branches. So let's go through this. As a branch, it's basically saying Joseph is blessed. Okay? Joseph is blessed as a builder, one who builds a family. Okay? So he's blessed in building family. Blessed by God. Make sense? And so we can understand that. We can say, okay, well, blessed by God, that's good. I want to be blessed by God. How about you? And then it goes on and says, even a fruitful bough by a well. And this word well, we've been doing this whole series on wells. This word well is a new word. All the other occasions where we've read the word well, it has referred to a pit. Like a dugout pit where water is. Okay? But now we come to this word well. In context, it says, like a fruitful bough by a well. And this word well here is the idea of like a fountain, water bubbling up. Okay? Now we sing, we sing the song "Spring Up a Well," and that would be the same kind of idea. It's water welling up, like an artesian well, right? And we've talked about the well. Water often is a type of the Spirit, right? And so it says that here he is. He's blessed in family building by this fountain that he's next to. All right. Now, I don't want to get all weird and make things too complex, but we're going to work our way through this, and I think we're going to learn some stuff. It goes on and says, whose branches run over the wall. Okay? Now, the branches over the wall, let's talk about that. Run. The branches run over the wall. And run is the idea of to march or take a stand. Does that make sense? And then it says over the wall. Over here conveys the idea of the top. That makes sense. That's like plain English. I could follow that, right? But it's also thinking of like the Most High. So in that sense, it's a reference to God. Okay? So if we look at that for just a second, and we start to kind of understand without the mystery, because here's the thing. We can talk about types and shadows in the Old Testament. We can go through, this is a type of this, and this is a type of that, and this is a foreshadowing of this, and this is a foreshadowing of that. And we can sit there and we can make it so complex that you read the Bible and go, I don't understand this at all. What does this mean? I don't want to do that to you. Okay? But what I do want to do is help you understand kind of the underlying message that we can receive from reading this, if that makes sense. So, it says, Joseph is a fruitful bough, even a fruitful bough by a well, whose branches run over the wall. I'm trying. And so the first thing we have to understand is the future. There's an element of this where his father is putting, making this statement about him, making blessing his kids, right? Talking about Joseph, and he goes on and talks about his hand being steady and all the different things, even though he's been attacked and all that. But he's talking about his future. There's some evidence of what has been in the past, but he's talking about the future. But understand something about the future. Your future is today. All your future is today. Because it's always today, because tomorrow never comes. That's exactly right. Tomorrow never comes. It's always today. So he's talking about his future todays. Make sense? And then, talking about content, what does his today contain? Well, first of all, it contains blessing from God. And it is part of him being a builder of family. That's part of what God called him to do. That's part of the promise that he has from God. I'm going to grab a sip of tea. Hold on. Don't normally do that when we're on video, but I've got to quit coughing here. Just hold. Is that it? Yeah. Okay. So when we look at this, he's doing what God's called him to do, right? He's being blessed by God in doing it. He is walking with God. You can march with God right over the wall. And what is a wall except a barrier, an obstacle? It can be a protection, can be a variety of things. But when you go over the wall, when you get over the top, when you are able to walk with God and get over whatever the adversity is, because he goes on and talks about all the things that have come against him. Well, that's the content of our life, and that's the life that we walk, right? So without, like I said, getting too typing shadowish. I want you to just think about this. What he's saying about Joseph is near God, the Spirit of God, and because of God's blessing, and because he's able to walk with God, he's able to get over these obstacles and have success. Does that make sense? In your life, do you have walls? Do you have things that are barriers to you? And if you do, are you walking with God in those areas? Or are you are you just letting the obstacles come? Relying on yourself. Like I said in the very beginning, we make life so much harder to live with all our planning and figuring about things that are not and will never be. We do worry about things that are not and will never be. My car is old, it'll probably break. What am I going to do if my car breaks? I need to be thinking about how to fix my broken car. How am I going to pay for this? It could cost thousands. It could cost tens of thousands. I have no idea where I'm going to come up with that money. Oh my goodness. God, I need a different job because I don't have enough money coming in. I can't afford to do, I better start eating beans and rice and nothing else because I've got to save up money for when this car fails. Right? I mean, do you know what I'm talking about? We just create this whole scenario and off we go into the wild blue yonder, And maybe you got one of those cars that's never going to have that problem. It's going to be great. I've owned several vehicles that they said, you have to worry about this or you have to worry about that, but I never had that problem. Right? 11% of these vehicles had to be recalled for this. 89% didn't. Right? But we're focused on the 11%. We're focused on the problem. And it's walking with God. Walking with God. Check this stuff with God. God, do I need to worry about this or are we good? Right? God, am I going to rely on you or not? Am I going to get over the top of this wall because I'm with you or am I going to just try and do it on my own? See if I can scale that wall by myself. Doesn't work like that. Well, at least not very well. That's what we need to look at. So here's Joseph. All these different things have come along in his life, but there's a legacy that's already been built that's being foretold of by his father as well, that he's going to stay with God. He's going to stay near the Spirit of God, the source of life. Let that well up and refresh him, right? And he's going to walk or march with God. This is how we need to live our life, right? We don't need to go around trying to do everything in our own strength and figure it all out in our own strength and foresee the future in our own strength, because that's where we end up with, oh my goodness, this is going to be a disaster. When we just trust that God is my source and he's going to provide all that I need. See, that's what the 23rd Psalm says. Yeah. It says, he's my shepherd and I'm not going to have need. I shall not want, lack. Right? So here's the thing. There's going to be a law passed and it's going to cost you millions of dollars that you don't have. And so you should be stressed out about that, freaking out. Okay? Or should you be going, God, you're my source? Now I can show you very easily how God deals with those kinds of money problems. He said, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's. Okay? And when the disciples were all stressed out about money, he went fishing. Caught a fish, and it had the money in it. I've caught fish before. I've never caught one with money in it, at least not that I'm aware of. Right? What can God do about your financial problem? He could fix it. He might let you learn through it. But you don't have to stress over it because you're relying on God. What about your physical ailments? Doctor says this and that and all these other things. Or I could recognize, hey, I have a relationship with a great physician. Maybe I'll rely on that. Maybe I'll rely on him. He made me in the first place. He ought to be able to figure out how to fix me. Right? Isn't that the crux of it right there? What are you going to build on? If I build on him, he says he'll bless me. Right? If I build on my own wisdom and strength, I don't know. You know? You can build on your own wisdom and strength and find out that, it's not working very well. Then you can be so stubborn that you keep doing it anyway. I know that doesn't apply to anybody in this room. It's the idea, we're supposed to have living water boiling up within us, right? That's the Spirit of God coming up within us. And there's a reason for that, and that's because that's our strength, that's our source, and that's our peace, and that's our hope, and that's, it's all of those things. And yet, we get in situations, and we sit and try and figure them out, and we run all these scenarios, we run all these things, we exhaust ourselves trying to figure out what could be, what might be, and be prepared for anything that could happen, waiting for the other sandal to drop. I changed that because it's King James Version today, so waiting for the other sandal to drop. Right? Instead of just letting the Spirit of God direct us and refresh us and well up within us to deal with whatever the problem is. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. There you go. First and last of Psalm 23. Yes, that's a good way to remind yourself really quick that he's your shepherd, and surely goodness and mercy are going to follow you all the days of your life. Yes, but it's what's in the middle is where we rely on him. Right? There's people that want to rely on the idea of God blessing them, but they don't want to deal with any of the stuff in between. Right? We don't really want him to be our shepherd. Could just be a consultant on sheep herding, where needed, right? It's the Jesus take the wheel thing, right? I'm really old, so the first song I heard along those lines came out of working with some guys out of the Philippines, and it was called Front Seat, Back Seat, and it said that I was busy trying to, drive, not doing a very good job, and my life got better when I turned all the driving over to the chief, meaning God, right? So it's better for us when we give it to God. When we give it to God is when we see miracles happen, right? And what is a miracle? A miracle is when something happens that's different than what the norm is, right? Our idea is to figure out how to normalize the situation. God's idea is how to move miraculously in your life. Does that make sense? So we're going to identify the well today. This is a good well that is being referenced. He's built next to a good well. He's growing next to a good well. This well is got water springing forth. When a well has water springing forth, it doesn't get stagnant. It has new life, right? And what we can learn from this is that we need to put down roots with God, right? The Holy Spirit comes alongside. That's what the Bible tells us. We need to put down roots there next to God, right? So that we're being fed and watered by God. So that instead of being stressed, we can be at peace with God. My dad used to say, and it's absolutely true, that mental fatigue is the worst. And it absolutely is true. And when we overthink things, when we worry about things that we don't have to worry about, we wear ourselves out. And mental fatigue is the worst because you can't go to sleep and wake up and feel better. Right? If you go dig a ditch and you're physically tired, you can go take a nap and wake up and feel better. When you're mentally fatigued, if you're lucky enough to be able to go to sleep, when you wake up, you're still fatigued because it's all the same pressures that you've created are all still there pushing on you. And there's a pretty good chance that instead of sleeping, your brain was sitting there trying to come to a resolution. I have to figure this out. You know what I'm talking about? I have to figure this out. Okay, let me help you with that. Trust God. That's your resolution. I'm just going to trust God. Oh, that's not a resolution. You're just saying that. No, that really is my resolution. I'm going to trust God. What are you going to do about this, that, or the other thing? I don't know. We'll see when we get there. Maybe that's what will happen. Maybe it's not. But the bottom line is, if I trust God, it's really his problem, not mine. Yes? So I think that what we can draw from this, and I said that it shows us a model of how to live life in a single verse. What we can draw from this is we need to get in a position where we're close to God spiritually, we're getting fed, and then we can walk in what God has called us to do, and we can rely on him to bless us, and then we can stand or march with God right over the top of whatever that obstacle is that you're facing. Isn't that simple? I mean, we forget how to do this. We forget that God has made it simple. He talks about having childlike faith, which is just trusting that it's, as a kid, the things I worried about were stupid, but as a kid, I knew that if my dad got involved, it was going to be fine. Or if my mom got involved, it'd be fine. I remember when I was in junior high school, and I was taking a test, and the instructor came by and snapped my test up off the desk, and he said, "You're cheating." I said, "What?" He said, "You're cheating." I said, "No, I'm not." He said, "Yeah, you were looking at someone else's paper." I said, "No, I wasn't." He said, "Yes, you were. You failed." Wrote an F on the paper. And I was just devastated. It was a English class, and what we were taking a test on is we had to memorize different poems, and I was writing out the poem, right, from memory. And so I went home. I told my dad, but it seemed hopeless to me. I was going to get an F, and that was it, and I'd been accused of wrongdoing and all kinds of stuff. And my dad made a phone call to the school, had a little chat, and I was sitting in my math class about a week later, and I got called to the office. Go see the dean. And I went into the dean's office, and I had no idea what was going on, why I was there, or anything else. And he said, "Understand that you were accused of cheating on this test." And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Were you cheating?" I said, "No." And he goes, "Okay, Here's a piece of paper. Go ahead and write the poem out. And I'll tell you what. It was a little intimidating because, we had moved past that lesson. What was it? That was a week ago, man. But I got it, right? Now, it wasn't an easy experience, no, but my dad stepped in and demanded that things be handled right. Right? So when we rely on God, it doesn't mean that everything's easy, but it does mean that God will set things right. Does that make sense? And so instead of stressing about a bunch of stuff we don't have to stress about, we can rely on God to take care of our situation. And he can help us, and he can guide us, and he can strengthen us. And we can save up all that energy that we would have wasted worrying about what may never be. Like to have a little extra energy? We can save up all that energy for just walking with God, letting him bless us. Right? So where we're at today is this. Where are you going to build? You're going to build on your own wisdom, or are you going to build next to the Spirit of God that sustains you and provides for you? Are you going to go with God? Are you going to walk with God? Are you going to trust in God? Or are you going to do it on your own? And so I'm going to leave you with this thought, quite simply. Where are you going to build? And that's it for this one.